Good evening. Welcome to the October 15th edition of the Downers Grove Village Council meeting. Glad you're with us tonight. For those in the council chambers, there are copies of the agenda on either side of the room and the shelves on the wall. For those watching at home, if you go to downers.us, lower left-hand corner, you'll see this week's meetings. There are links there to all the same documents. Let's all rise together and join with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Megan, would you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Wallace? Commissioner Earl?
Here.
Commissioner Skowski-Fuji?
Here.
Commissioner Kulavani?
Here.
Commissioner Gray?
Here.
Commissioner Jose?
Here.
Mayor Barnett?
Here. First item on our agenda tonight are minutes of previous council meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
Mayor Barnett, I move that the council adopt the meeting minutes of October 8, 2019 as presented.
Second.
Any comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you. We're moving right along. Item 4 on our agenda are public comments for items not on tonight's agenda. This is the portion of our meeting where folks are welcome to come up and give us some input, have questions if they have them about any items not on tonight's agenda. We'll have additional public commentary at each agenda item when we hit them. So if anybody would like to come to the podium, come on up, tell us what's on your mind.
David Rose, David Rose. I have prepared remarks. Given that we don't have a full house this evening, I hope you'll indulge me if I go a little bit past time. But I'm compelled to speak because of the substantial mischaracterization of my comment about the cannabis ordinance as it appears in the October 8th meeting minutes. I do not know the reason for the mischaracterization, but because of how badly misrepresented my comment was, I find it appropriate to repeat my point more deliberately and to connect it to other matters the discussion and vote open. The need for a cannabis ordinance exposed the fact that the nature of what is debated changes dramatically depending on whether the ordinance under consideration is to permit or to prohibit. If the ordinance is to permit, the debate becomes principally a code enunciation and enforcement question. If the ordinance is to prohibit, the debate should be over the rationale from a policy standpoint why cannabis businesses are prohibited while other businesses connected to other such substances are not. No such debate took place, however. Instead, a vote to prohibit was taken as an opportunity to show disapproval of the state's decision to legalize recreational cannabis. My comment expressed my assessment that the commissioners and the members of the public who were in favor of prohibiting cannabis were employing arguments that could be applied just as readily to other substances the citizens of Downers Grove and most Americans accede to permitting in spite of the known physical harm and adverse financial effect they produce for their consumers and or because of that consumption for others. Therefore, I suggested for the sake of consistency, the ordinance be amended to include these other substances such as alcohol, cigarettes, and the like, and by that amendment, compel discussion of why cannabis businesses deserve prohibition while the others did not. To my regret, though not to my surprise, no commissioner took up my suggestion, nor did any commissioner voting to prohibit ever indicate over the weeks of discussion the basis of their belief for the policy difference. To repeat, talking about the horrors of cannabis in isolation is not an intellectually sound basis for justifying policy. Taking such an approach undercuts one's claim of being able to separate policy decision from personal attitude and or other influences. That failure is what I believe I heard commissioners opposed to the ordinance to prohibit suggest as their worrisome concern going forward. I share that concern. This vote is interesting, however, because it strikes me as another example of how Americans believe in freedom for both themselves and others, except when they don't, of how Americans profess to be law-abiding, except when they put themselves, for whatever reason, in the set of people to whom a particular law doesn't apply. of how the default attitude in the U.S. is to permit behavior unless and until that behavior proves worthy of effort by some set of citizens powerful enough to prohibit it. In principle, sometimes even in practice. In that vein, it's appropriate to observe also that federal laws are passed or not, cited or not, enforced or not, with similar inconsistency. In particular, the federal government's categorization of cannabis feels to have as much political motivation as scientific foundation behind it. That categorization translates directly into the need for cannabis businesses to be cash-based for one, and heightened sensitivity to cannabis use and opportunity for employment for another. Change the categorization and those issues and associated problems diminish substantially. Clearly, such inconsistency, if it becomes too pervasive, undercuts the citizenry's trust in the creation, enhancement, and adjudication of the nation's laws, and thereby government itself. This is a problem approaching boiling point in this country. Lastly, allow me to note that as Americans also profess to believe in the fundamental values of equality and equal opportunity, except when we don't. Many of the advantaged expect those disadvantaged by such inconsistency to get over it and move on without the need for much in the way of rectification for the harm done and the inequity produced in past or still to come. A major long-standing contributor to inequity in Illinois is the funding of public education, thanks to its heavy reliance on property taxes. In inequity, the state did woefully little to redress with the school funding law passed in 2017, I believe it was. As a result, the frail bonds that hold the state together continue to fray. The state of Illinois, by which I also refer to its subordinate levels of government, has dug itself into a huge financial hole of unpaid bills, unfunded pension liabilities, deferred maintenance, deferred new construction, debt repayment obligations, among others. The hole stands little chance of being filled unless officials at all levels of government find a way to build a sense of unity and community between the state's urban, suburban, and rural populations. Any politician who promoted cannabis as a major fount of new revenue to help fill that hole should be added to the list of past and present officials who understand neither economics nor mathematics. Nevertheless, should one not applaud a relatively well-to-do municipality such as Downers Grove for voting to prohibit cannabis, whether it does so for the following purpose or not, on the grounds its prohibition in their town opens up opportunity for communities badly in need of new businesses and tax revenue. If I missed that amongst the reasons given for voting to prohibit, I apologize. If you did invoke that purpose, I look forward to other such responses promoting unity, including ordinances to prohibit alcohol, cigarettes, and the like. Thank you.
Thank you. The others, non-agenda items, please.
Good evening again. Thank you for having me. My name is Francis Cerisi, Downers Grove resident since 1990. After the last time I was here speaking about this ordinance dealing with disturbing the peace, I did what you told me to, Mayor. I went and spoke with a lawyer. I didn't actually speak with one lawyer, I spoke with 4. I took advantage of 1-800-Lawyers or 1-800-Free Law. You get the first 15 minutes for free. I was also, whether it was kosher or not, able to talk to a judge who was in a restaurant that I worked, and I comped him his dessert, and he was cool enough to talk to me. The issue here is that that dog right there behaves like a dog. He behaves like a dog during the day, not late at night, not early in the morning. And the legal problem that these 4 attorneys and judge found with the ordinance is that it has not got any boundaries. It's just 24 hours wide open. And that, I also found, with the aid of some assistants of mine at work, 4 high school kids looking through the computers for 3 days. I'm the only guy in town that has a disturbance of the peace because of a barking dog. They couldn't find anybody else that's gotten a ticket for that. And without the boundaries, and what I mean by boundaries is no police officer has been in my house early in the morning. Why? Because my dogs don't bark early in the morning. No police officers have been in my house in the evening because they don't bark in the evening. When do they bark? In the middle of the day. What else goes on in the middle of the day? People coming up will be blowing the snow off their driveways. People in the summer are mowing their lawns. Kids are playing. Music is louder, you can hear it. The way the law is being enforced, I am getting penalized for having a dog. If there was any other, like I said, a boundary or a history of it happening, then I'd have a lot less to say. Dogs do what dogs do. They bark. Their job is also protection of my home and property. When my dog sees a police officer walking from the street toward our house, they bark. Why? That's their job. I offer anyone to explain to me their experience with a police officer coming out of a police car that didn't look intimidating. Maybe I'm wrong, but they look like police officers. That's their job. If you can see my dog from the outside of the house, he can see you. If you are standing there with your phone or a small video recorder videotaping them, you are getting his attention. What's he going to do? He's going to be a dog. He's going to bark at you. Does it happen all day? No, it does not happen all day. I've been training dogs since 1972. A dog just cannot out and out bark without a water bowl for more than 8 minutes. I'm not cruel to my dog, but when my wife and I are out of the house, he is in our bedroom because we have another dog, and we would not we don't want them together when we're not home. Why ask for a situation? It's like 2 7-year-old kids. I'm not saying, I'm just saying, but he's in a room. He's not going to bark for more than 8 minutes. So that's that story. And like I said before, the problem is with the law. Mayor, you made a statement dealing with fair enforcement of the law last time, I believe. And the thing is, if there was some kind of boundaries within the law, which there are in other villages and townships, I checked with Berkeley and I checked with Elmhurst, middle of the day, it's fair game. Before 6 in the morning, after 8 at night, is not. I've never had a police officer to my house in the morning or in the evening. And like I said, last time, just for no other real good reason, I asked for the word the Pope gives you when he do something.
Dispensation.
Dispensation, yeah, I asked for that just because it was the first vocabulary word I asked for, I could think of. Now I'm just looking for a little clarity and a little bit of boundary flexibility. I've missed 3 days of work going to court. I have 2 tickets at home that I'll have the opportunity to go to courthouses in Wheaton to put those on one day. But I'm going to miss another day of work for this. I don't know how much flesh my neighbor wants, but once again, the man's a control freak. The police and other people have tried to get him to sit down and negotiate, and it's his way or no way. He has no compromise in his vocabulary. And that's the story. I'm being penalized for having a dog. You can see what a piece of work he is, right? He's tearing up this council room, and he's interrupted everybody barking. Thank you for your time. If I could ask one other favor, totally abstract of this, could somebody give us all a Reader's Digest version of why cannabis business has to be cash-based?
I'm the wrong guy to answer this, but I'll give it a shot. Because cannabis is still a federally classified, I think, level 1 drug, the banking system in general, FDIC, Federally Deposit Insurance Corp, backed banks can't operate in a way where they would transact on behalf of businesses that they knowingly are operating from a cannabis business. It's really poorly described. But cannabis is still a federally illegal drug. And so businesses just can't enter the normal federally regulated banking system with cash from that business activity. That's in a nutshell.
From my, not necessarily experience.
You can go back up there if you'd like. We want people at home to be able to hear the conversation, both sides of it.
I'm not personally a gangster, and I don't personally have family history of being a gangster. It's just something that's cool to me, and I've studied it for a long time. It would seem to me that not at all unlike alcohol and prohibition, making cannabis business a cash business just asks for all kinds of cracks and room to go for making it money laundering or money, just easier to get away with things if it's cash than if it was not. So I was just curious.
Yeah, it's a federal issue. You may be right, but it's a federal issue.
It was all just conversation.
Sure. Thank you.
For your time again.
Any other comments on subjects not on tonight's agenda? Okay, with that, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
Mayor Barnett, I move that the council adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Any comments on the consent agenda? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you. We do not have an active agenda tonight, so we will move on now to our first reading. During the first reading portion of the meeting, we'll have some presentation of the issue. We'll take some council time to discuss it amongst ourselves, and then we'll solicit input from the audience. With that, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mayor Barnett. There are 4 items on tonight's first reading agenda. The first item is consideration of an ordinance amending disabled parking provisions. Here with background information on this item is our village attorney, Enzo Petrarca.
Thank you, Dave. The next item, as Dave said, is an amendment to Chapter 14, which would add a violation for individuals who abuse disabled parking privileges by using passes and placards that are not actually issued to them. So currently, when officers observe that violation, they have to write it under state law, prosecute it at the state level. By amending this and including it as an ordinance violation, our officers are able to write it as an ordinance violation and then prosecute it either at the local level through field court. Happy to answer any questions.
Council questions?
I just have a question.
Please.
Just popped into my head. How do they know that it's a violation, that it's not the person who it's issued to?
I think the officers some of them are trained in that area. And
Got it.
They do their thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can kind of answer that
Great.
because they do have numbers. The placards have numbers on them, so they are issued to a specific person. So usually they can call that in and figure that out.
Got it.
Rich?
Just as a comment, I didn't realize this until several months ago, is that if you're dropping someone off, like at the front of the Jewel, and it's their placard, you then, as the driver, are not allowed to go park in a handicapped spot, because then you'd be subject to this violation.
The officers will stay in the parking lot and they'll review who actually is exiting the vehicle. And from that, they're able to track who, as Commissioner issued to who the driver is.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, well, like most issues, enforcement, unfortunately, is really one of the best ways to get compliance when enforcement's known to be happening, and so making it easier to enforce locally is going to be doing our best to make sure that the enforcement happens, which is really the key to making sure people play by the rules. So I'm glad we're doing this. Moving on. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Anybody from the audience want to touch this subject? Now we'll move on.
Thank you, Mayor. The next item is the consideration of an award of contract to H&H Electric Company for the replacement of the traffic signal at the intersection of Finley Road and Finley Square Mall. Contract amount would be just over $323,000. That is within budget. This intersection and the traffic signal that controls it were constructed in 1985, so that's about 34 years ago, if I did my math correctly. This signal has exceeded its useful life and needs to be replaced and upgraded with modern technology. We did do a call for bids just a few weeks ago. We received 2 bids. The low bidder was H&H Electric Company in the amount I previously mentioned. We are familiar and pleased with H&H Electric's work. They currently hold a traffic signal maintenance contract with us. Happy to answer any questions that the council may have.
Questions on the council, comments? Okay, any from the audience? Keep moving. Thanks, Dave.
Item C is an ordinance amending the number of Class R3 liquor license, and our village attorney has the background on this item.
Thanks, Dave. This item is a proposed ordinance to increase the R3 full alcohol liquor licenses from 1 to 2. And our R3 license provides for the retail sale of full alcohol both on-premise and off-premise. Currently, you only have 1 of those licenses issued, and it's issued to Cooper's Hawk. A new business coming into town, Foxtail at Main and Maple, is also requesting the same license for both on-premise consumption as well as off-sale consumption. So this license would, again, just increase the amount of the licenses from 1 to 2.
Thank you, Enzo. Any council comments or questions? Anybody in the audience want to comment on this? Exciting subject, another restaurant in town. Okay, any other council comments? Moving on, keep going.
The last item is an exciting topic, actually. A lot of work has already been put into this. I am pleased to present the council's 2019 to 2021 long-range plan. This long-range plan, like all the other ones that have preceded it, really consists of 4 main components. Our strategic goals, trends and issues that we've identified that would affect our long-term future, and then strategies and solutions which we could pursue and put in place to address those trends and issues, and a prioritized 2-year work plan that would be this council's work plan prior to the next round of elections. The long-range plan in and of itself really guides a lot of different operations and policies of this village. We use it as a guidebook to prepare our annual budgets, and in fact, you'll see in tonight's presentation there is a quick preview of the FY20 budget. It does guide daily operational decisions and of course is used by this council when considering a variety of policy decisions. Here's the schedule that we have gone through to put together this long-range plan. We've been at it for a couple of months, and it started with the publication of a draft plan near the front end of August, and we'll conclude at the next council meeting as we follow this schedule with the acceptance of the long-range plan final report. There have been many key changes that have been directed by this village council since the publication of the draft or proposed plan a couple months ago in 3 key areas. First, in the area of strategic goals, we have linked this long-range plan to our comprehensive plan to show the vision, goals, and objectives of that document and how they relate to the strategic goals in the long-range plan. This providing a broader picture of direction that we will be following and hoping to implement. Also, on that same note, we have linked this long-range plan to our series of annual reports online. This was in direct response to council members who said, hey, could you show us some of the measurable performance results that we've accomplished over the years in support of our goals? And so we did provide that link. It's important to note that the annual reports are often organized by strategic goal, so the connections are pretty easy to make. The next category is changes to the facilities sustainability plan. There was a lot of discussion about this topic during the long-range planning meetings. It is no longer the facilities sustainability plan. It is now, after council direction, the village facilities replacement and sustainability plan. Narrowing the scope of this project, changing the pace of this project and schedule, and starting our planning efforts where the previous project left off. So significant changes were directed by this council on this item. In that vein, in the last area of changes, priority action items, a lot of work was done by this council to create our priority action items. We actually have 8 priority action items, and we did develop an implementation schedule as depicted in a Gantt chart, which we'll show you here in a second. And I think one of the biggest changes here is this idea of a thorough reconsideration of our priority action items once we have drafted the facilities replacement and sustainability plan, which is scheduled somewhere around Q1 or Q2 of next year. We've always had a mid-cycle check-in, but this is much more of a relook and reconsideration, and we'll be in a much better spot to understand our organizational capacity once the facilities replacement and sustainability plan has been drafted. The strategic goals were confirmed through this process. They are here on the screen. These have not changed in the past couple of years. And the issues, strategies, and solutions which we discussed are also shown on this slide. I won't go through them all, but we have dealt with many of them or continue to deal with many of them already. Wanted to take a minute and touch on the FY20 budget preview. This was discussed way back in the early part of August, but still very important. On the general fund side, we are expecting, and you'll probably see, an increase in expenses of about $1.5 million. This is driven primarily by required contributions to public safety pension funds, likely to be somewhere just north of $650,000. To address and keep a balanced budget, we do have some potential general fund revenue increases. The first one is the corresponding property tax levy for those public safety pension required contributions in the same amount, $650,000 or so. And this council did discuss at length the concept of perhaps this is the year we would have to make a small increase in our property tax levy for operations. This would be the first one in the past 9 years. So we put up about a 3% number. $175,000, $200,000 is a likely number you may see moving forward in the FY20 budget, and perhaps other smaller increases in other existing revenues as necessary to maintain a sustainable and balanced budget moving forward. Here is the priority action item schedule and general prioritization. There are 8 priority action items. Starting with the facility replacement and sustainability at the top and moving through. You can see the innovation that the council added this time around, the area shown in yellow. That is intended to depict the time at which we would regroup and reconsider and reprioritize perhaps once we complete the planning portion of the facilities issue. Extensive work was done by this council over the past couple of months. We wanted to present this plan back to the council and the community. And most importantly, we want to make sure that this long-range plan reflects the policy direction provided by this council. With that, Mayor, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Dave. There was a lot of work, and it went back a long time, and I'm thankful for all my colleagues' participation in that. It was a little longer, I think, than it's been in the past, but there's some big items in front of us. When we last met in the committee room, we, I don't know if I exactly used the words "speak now or forever hold your peace," but it was something along those lines. In an effort to try and get us to the point where we could start acting. We've been planning, and now it's time to act. And so I'm looking forward to this and just thankful for all the hard work from everybody that's gone into it. So are there any council comments, questions, things they want to add to the conversation? Rich?
Marge?
No, go ahead, Rich.
Yeah, I wanted to get an item as part of the record. I don't expect us to make any decisions about 2 items, but one relates to potential downtown design review, and the other one is, looking at a potential tree ordinance. So what I'd like to do is go through a brief PowerPoint presentation and then, read from the 2-page notes here on sort of the format. And I would hope that at some time in the future, perhaps in the pause, we could take a look at this. Or, if we talk about this at some other time, decide, well, it may not even be a high priority item because we can get it done within less than 6 months, or it might not take multi-department. So this is a study that was put together by a friend and me. That started a couple of years ago. She has chosen to remain anonymous in this, but this was not my own work. So the next slide. I want to go over the issues quickly, the questions, what to avoid, the characteristics of a high-quality downtown, possible solutions, and the recommendations. The whole emphasis of this was based on citizens being upset about the approval of the apartment building at Main and Maple. There was a general feeling, in my view, amongst the people that their input wasn't taken seriously and that recommended changes couldn't be accommodated by the developer because it was so late in the process. I actually met with that developer during this time frame, just as a private citizen, and asked them about that. And one of the points they made, being Trammell Crow, was that it's a whole lot easier to try to incorporate changes, and in this case it would have been one more setback on Main Street and the top floor there, that it would have been a lot easier to incorporate those very early in the process before they spent something like $115,000 in plans and 6 months in engineering. And even if the Plan Commission or the Council came up with recommended changes, it was really too late to do that. So that's where it started. What it does is it raises the potential that a developer may go into a community with less than full community support. And we do have really good downtown design guidelines, but they're not very enforceable. So it's really up to the presence and the stature of the community development organization to try to get developers to line up, and if they choose not to, they can just revert to the building code. And the thing that's so important in my view about downtown is the buildings that will go in the next 5 or 10 years will shape the way it looks for the next 50, 60, even 100 years. The other thing I've noticed is that we are competing with other suburbs. We're competing for shoppers, for diners, for businesses that want to move here, for people that want to move here. Next slide. So how can we ensure that projects are durable and use high-quality materials? How do we ensure that the buildings complement and enhance or at least don't detract from an eclectic downtown? And other questions, should we spend some time in updating the 2009 Downtown Design Guidelines and also the 2008 Downtown Pattern Book? And another philosophical question is, how do you balance community expectations because people feel an ownership to their downtown with the owners and the developers' property rights? And then how do you protect and enhance the value of a downtown, and how do you give staff and village council more tools to request positive changes without impeding the development process? So what we did in this process was we actually went to various suburbs, including Glenview, Wheaton, Glen Ellen, Park Ridge, and Barrington, and talked to their community development directors or similar people to talk about their downtown design review boards or architectural review boards. We asked them, why did you set this up? What are you doing that you like? What would you do differently? We called Elmhurst, and we decided not to go to Aurora. Glenview, we found out, it has very stringent and specific, next slide please, very stringent appearance commission where they get into the real details. Wheaton is on the other end of the spectrum where they don't want developers and builders going in front of public meetings. They actually want staff to handle that. So they do a thing that if a design does not come in substantial conformance with their downtown design guidelines, then they have to go before the review board. Barrington has what I feel is a nice balanced approach. I actually went to 2 of their meetings where very early on in the process, before they've invested a lot of money in plans, they actually sit down, roll up their sleeves with a panel, sort of like this, and they present what they're planning for in a development, and then they come back with various ideas. Not to give them specific architectural cues, that's really up to the developer and the architects, but to allow the community to see what these processes are. What I've noticed the developers like about that is they get great input, they get more community buy-in, and they have, their projects are more welcome. One thing I can say in talking to a developer, also Trammell Crow, put in an apartment building in Glenview, even though it was very rigorous, the people there were very supportive because they knew that they had the visibility into the project early on. Next slide. So what do we want to avoid? Any projects that negatively affect downtown, not giving the community early opportunity to view and comment on proposed downtown projects, development process that does not allow the community to buy into a project, or even if changes are requested by staff, a builder is not obligated to honor those requests, And you want to avoid dictating architectural styles in detail because it's important that downtowns change over time, so you don't want to be too stringent with that. And here's a comparison just of a picture of Main and Maple. And this was the development that is just opening up in Lisle, and you can kind of see the differences for yourself. Next slide. So the characteristics of a high-quality downtown: it establishes a sense of place, it supports the character of the downtown, and as I already mentioned, it's built over time. Next slide. A downtown is multifunctional. People work there, people shop there, they go to church there, tourists come, they house people, there's government services in a downtown, there's dining, there's entertainment, sometimes there's lodging, there's cultural attractions. It should be compact, it should be walkable, it should be pedestrian friendly and walkable, it should encourage people to congregate and to gather, and it promotes human activity and attracts others and creates a high level of community ownership. Next slide, please. What is the best way to ensure high-quality design and construction standards? How do you best provide and maintain good suburban design to complement surrounding buildings and don't detract from them, and to build upon our small-town village aspects of Downers Grove? Next slide. What you're trying to do is make downtown an even more desirable location that favors economic development. There's just some pictures I put in there. This happened to be a picture of Main Street in Naperville, which is one block west of Washington. In their nightscaping, it's just a beautiful, beautiful place. Other design considerations. Next slide. These are just some things that add intrigue and interest, like alcoves. The one in the lower right-hand corner, attractive areas that go in from parking lots and things like that. If you look at some of the buildings on the back side of the buildings on Main Street, it doesn't look anything like this picture, and I think these are areas that we could work on as well. So next slide, the options to consider here is number one, just continue the current process. Staff will work with developer, encourage compliance with the downtown design guidelines. Compliance is encouraged, but it's not mandatory. The Public and Plan Commission review comes after the developer has expended significant resources of time and money. The second option that I was suggesting is that staff requires downtown developments to substantially comply with downtown design guidelines. Option three would be to add a preliminary or concept project review step at the Plan Commission, where once again, before a lot of money was invested in plans and in engineering, they could have a roll up their sleeves, everyone work together and see how we could make it better. Option four, establish a downtown design review board, same as option three, but it would be have a mix of design professionals, other stakeholders, including downtown business owners, downtown property owners, and one downtown resident. Other options. Next slide. Recommendations is to create a downtown design ad hoc committee to evaluate all options, where we would hold public meetings, much like we did when we were coming up with the historic preservation ordinance, and get involvement from downtown building and business owners, residents, design professionals, and the village staff who has to implement these policies, and then evaluate and make recommendations to the village council on the downtown design guidelines, the pattern book, and if the downtown guidelines and the pattern book become standards for design or remain just guidelines, if there should be a downtown design review board, and what development issues would be addressed by right. And the next slide goes into the makeup, and I thought of an alternate plan here of perhaps forming an ad hoc committee by combining the Plan Commission and the ADRB, where they could meet on their regular meeting nights. For the Plan Commission, the first Monday of the month, and for ADRB, the third Wednesday of the month. Use ad hoc agenda items just added on to the regular meeting agenda, and assign action items to various members. So that's that presentation for your consideration. You don't have to comment. I welcome any comments or questions.
Thank you. I think we have all heard pieces of this over the last, some of us last few months, some of us maybe a year or more. And I think we're all I know myself, I'm looking forward to talking about this in way more detail, the kind of detail you laid out there. We just, at this point, are holding off until we get to that review period in yellow up there and decide where things stand from a workload standpoint. So, I'm thinking that's what everybody feels, probably. Greg?
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with that completely in terms of timing, and I look forward to that additional and more detailed discussion. From a substance standpoint, I think it's important to point out that when it comes to at least residential developments, the design guidelines are already made mandatory through the special use requirement. It's one of the conditions that's typically placed on by staff and approved by the Planning Commission and this council. So when it comes to, say, Made on Maple, it was found to comply with the design guidelines, and I think that's important to know. One of my larger clients likes to talk about walking before you run. And I think if the issue is that there's some concern about whether the design guidelines fit what folks really expect to see in our downtown, then maybe we start by updating that first and then expand from there as necessary. Just a quick thought there.
Okay.
But I look forward to the continued discussion. Hopefully we can have it closer to Q1, Q2 as opposed to later. Thanks for bringing it forward, Rich. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. The second issue is just tree preservation. You have it in front of you. I guess I would, instead of me reading this, if you had any questions or comments. This one is more challenging. I happen to be a director of Pierce Honor Heritage Alliance, and one of the things we do is trees. So we actually started looking at some other suburbs for some model ordinances. I've also talked to people at the Morton Arboretum, specifically Lydia Scott, who is the director of the Chicago Region Trees Initiative. So they actually work with suburbs to help them in that regard. So that's something I'd like us to take a look at as well. So I appreciate your thoughtful consideration of these items for the future.
Rich, can I ask one quick question? For those of us that aren't familiar with a couple of these items, and just if we can get kind of a general, kind of short version, the 2009 Downtown Design Guideline and the Downtown Pattern Book, could you give just a little bit of explanation for those here that aren't familiar, or those are home?
Yeah, the Downtown Design Guidelines get into more of what kind of architectural features you would put in a building. Like one of the things I remember is that a building is separated into three parts. You have your base, you have your midsection, and then you have your cornice or your top section. So it gives some great ideas. It talks about what windows should look like. It talks about how openings and things like that. So it really does give good guidance. The pattern book is more like, well, if the way you place various buildings around the village. That's a little bit more confusing, particularly if you've taken things from the pattern book and put it in the comprehensive plan, and people will point to say, wait a minute, that building's not supposed to be that tall. It was supposed to be, short townhomes or things like that.
Great, thank you.
I'd recommend to everybody, but particularly our newest members, between now and sometime in the Q1, Q2 neighborhood, find those documents. They're all available, and minutes associated with them are also available, and you can sort of do some of your own study of what has transpired to this point and what documents are out there, because that would certainly be the starting point for any conversation.
Thanks, Rich.
Thank you.
Leslie?
Yeah. Mine is more, of course, in line with the tree preservation, as I'm sure people who listen to me talk expect. I would love to talk more about this as we start to get into Q1, Q2. If anybody watched any of the long-range planning, I am very much in favor of strengthening our goals for sustainability and natural resource protection. Much like Rich with his discussion on the architectural review, I would like to see us consider stormwater retention and sustainability earlier on in the process of the design of buildings that are under our control. And I hope that's something that, as we go forward with some facilities, we can continue to discuss. And hopefully we can kind of revisit this at a little bit later date when some of those big things are under our belt in Q1, Q2.
Thank you. Anything else?
Yeah, I support revisiting both of these items, absolutely. Rich and I have been talking for a long time, especially the tree stuff, and especially what can we do to save some of those trees on a private property when they're being clear cut just to jam the biggest house they can in on that lot. It's not good for the neighborhood, it's not good for stormwater, it's not good in a lot of ways. And there's no way you can ever replace a large tree with a small tree. And it's never going to look, it's not going to look the same except for maybe in about 60 or 75 years. So yes, there's a time frame, but you always have to be forward thinking when it comes to trees because they take so long to grow. So we need to do something sooner rather than later. So thanks.
Thank you. Greg?
Thank you, Mayor. With regard to the tree preservation ordinance, I think I've fallen to a little bit different camp. I tend to favor more private property rights in this particular area. That said, I have had several residents of Denver and Woods reach out recently about some activity in that neighborhood. And I think it's fairly reasonable to expect that if you live in a neighborhood that includes the word woods, that there's going to be a fair number of trees. So if someone's going to buy a lot there or a home there and expect to clear cut it, I think they should also expect there's going to be a lot of upset people, and rightfully so. And while I might not support the idea village-wide, I think I would at the very least support examining this very closely for the Denver and Woods neighborhood, whether it's an overlay or whatever other solution staff might have. But there's no doubt that we're Downers Grove for a reason, and we have to take that seriously. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks.
Yeah, I totally agree with your comments.
Anybody else on this? We're really on the long-range plan here. So anybody from the audience want to weigh in on the long-range plan?
Good evening, Mayor, Council, and staff. My name is Jack Marengo. My wife Pat and I live at a KD1 condo building at 945 Burlington. I've lived in Downers Grove for 46 years and have been a downtown resident property owner for the past 12 years. Pat and I paid our 1.5% yearly tax to the SSA during those 12 years. We saw value in the investment to improve the infrastructure of downtown Downers Grove. But I have to admit, we were looking forward to not paying that additional tax once the TIF was paid and the SSA ended in 2020. I recently attended a board meeting of the Downtown Downers Grove Management Corporation and learned that the council will be considering 3 options to establish a new SSA for the business and downtown resident property owners in 2021. Option 1, maintaining the same SSA boundaries and tax the resident property owners and downtown businesses at a reduced rate. Option 2, expanding the SSA boundaries and tax more of the residents and property owners and downtown businesses. Option 3, maintaining the same SSA boundaries for the businesses and excluding the resident property owners. I would like to voice my preference for option 3, for excluding the downtown resident property owners. While I can justify the previous SSA TIF tax for needed infrastructure improvements, I do not feel that the new proposed SSA, which would now fund the DMC, parking system improvements, and upgraded landscaping, should be a tax burden for only the downtown resident property owners and businesses. I'm not asking to pay less taxes. I'm just asking that the taxes be, to support downtown, be shared more fairly throughout the village. I do not feel that the Downtown Management Corporation has provided any meaningful extra value to the downtown resident property owners. I do feel that these expenses should be shared by all the property owners in Downers Grove in order to support the heart of their village, the downtown. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, Dave, jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, but we're likely to have some more input on that after downtown management meets later this month. Is that right?
Yes, they have a couple meetings scheduled. They have a meeting scheduled in late October focusing on the commercial and business owners. And then they have another regularly scheduled board meeting the first week of November, where we've asked them to take a formal position and vote on the options, if you will. And then we'll be back in front of this council in mid-November, Mayor.
So thank you for coming. Be sure you make that opinion known to them as well. I'm assuming you will, but please do that.
Hi, I'm Sue Farley. I've lived in Downers for 36 years, and I'm an extremely active member all these years. Maybe I should give you a little background as I speak about the long-term planning. I'm a master gardener. I'm involved in the I plant the gardens at the library with another fellow organic gardener and a part-time employee of the library. I'm in Morton Arboretum volunteer. I volunteer at the Park District, work at Belmont Prairie and the Lyman Woods with their new program they're having with their native plants and edible gardens forthcoming. Let's see what else. I'm a green grover. We have been very active in getting out with people, something as simple as we've gone door to door 2.5 years ago on the volcano mulch. And we've gone to people with the papers explaining why it's bad. We can trace it back in this area probably to a landscape company in Hinsdale that kind of sold all the people in Hinsdale about this great look, and then of course more people just had to have that look, not knowing that it causes the roots to curl around and eventually strangle the tree and it dies, so because it can't get air. So it has been an active thing that has been addressed heavily. I'm also a member of the Downers Clean Energy Task Force group, which is about 65 members that are very interested and have promoted exposing all the different clean energy options through education, talking, and they're a subsidiary of the DuPage group. I'm involved of the Darien Garden Club, which actually is has probably 50% of their members from Downers Grove. Don't be discouraged by their name. They just happen to meet at night. I'm involved in the Downers Grove Garden Club, the Downers Grove Organic Garden Club, and also a supporter, and have worked with Lydia Scott on the CRT group, understanding the Chicagoland Tree Initiative, where they had done a scan of the whole Chicagoland area tree canopy. They're going to redo another one in the next year. So you can look online through the Chicago Regional Tree Initiative program. Under Morton Arboretum is where they're listed, and you can just enter your town, another town, and see how you rate. It's about a 4-page depth thing for each town. But anyway, I come here to talk about the fact I did attend the planning meeting, what was that, 9/23, to listen to the plans, and I'm also a member of your environmental commission, so I do work full-time. So, but I have a lot of energy. I basically want to formally address that there are many residents out here in the community. As a master gardener, I do a lot of help desks. I'm out, whether it be a Good Sam at their green fair. We work at the bridges. I've done that fundraiser where they're doing, the bridges garden walk in the summer, where you're interacting with people. And basically, I hear a lot of things from people that they are really concerned about. Will Downers Grove get into the program of addressing environmental concerns? Will they will they take it seriously? Something as simple as I hear you talking about, I don't know what the tree preservation ordinance that you're proposing are, since you're only people who have seen it. But the idea is yes, it takes 15 years to 20 years for a tree to recover. Stormwater is seriously affected when we remove trees, which people don't understand. They are the best thing. Working at the library, just working in the garden, and the help desk that I do at the library, I meet with people. We hand out, and we have my cohort has a schematic of all the different plants that we have there. We also hand out all lists of plants that anyone can find. to be able to plant for water retention. I can't tell you how many people don't realize if they just plant some of these plants, their water problems might, between their neighbor's house and theirs, subside greatly. It's all out there, composting. People didn't know we have it. It's part of, like I feel, just an educational process of getting people aware of what is available. But my main concern, getting back to my notes, is that we are not specifically spelling out in the long-range plan a description under the goals, strategies, solutions, or the statements that I've read, specific wording that states identify areas to be environmentally sustainable focused, analysis of improvements to environmental sustainability, analysis of environmental sustainability. We're just not utilizing those words in all the paperwork that I have seen. I know it was discussed, and I know that there are major projects ahead between staff's time and village council. You know, the computer system replacement is a priority, the facility replacement and evaluation, the parking, and the downtown all have to be done around the same time. Yet, I just know and have heard from many community residents that they need more green space downtown, stormwater control, planting ideas, trees, native plants, water retention planting, composting, focusing and promoting the yard and food scraps, more recycling, clean energy usage, electric charging stations. These are all areas that I continue to hear since I'm out in talking to people on a regular basis. They just don't know if the village is planning to really address these issues. I want to again emphasize that we have the skill set in your volunteers that you can depend on. There's different committees, the zoning, the technical, the architectural, the ECC, to help you focus on the environmental sustainability ideas. To be clear, I'm here to express to all of you there's a lot of interest here in the community. Whether I am speaking for many people, I'm sure you might be hearing it from your neighbors. But when I'm working a help desk and I have people going, we have compost, what do you mean? Because I'm handing out brochures on what, I print out what's on the website. People want to know, they want to participate in it. I mean, I'm working with the library because they are wonderful in doing the education. And I'm working with their speaker bureau because I have connections through the Garden Clubs of America of Illinois. They have a list of speakers where we can get that information out to the people. But I feel like basic, as nice as you've made the connections for the links and everything on this, you need to put the words on this report. They're just not there. We need to have the words highlighted there. I think as Leslie had highlighted in that one thing, something as simple as environmental leader among municipalities, we need to focus and have the words there. One question for you, sir. I noticed when you were speaking about the downtown review and you wanted to have the zoning, the architect, why only those committees? Why aren't we including like the environmental? I never really saw in your brochures that to plan our downtown area, to make it comfy, you have to have the greenery. You have to have that included, and that just needs to be a whole part of the picture. And again, at the bottom, where we're starting, where we're talking about it, seems to be the most important. So anyway, I hope that where I want us to be strong in is the environmental. Thank you.
Thank you. Please.
Good evening, everyone. Some of you may know me. I'm Alan Armstrong. I'm the president of the HOA for Acadia on the Green Building 2. We're the building at the corner of Mokel and Curtis, kitty corner from Angelo's Pizza. Tonight I'm here just to share some additional information on the long-range planning with the downtown Downers Grove SSA, or whether we continue with a new SSA and how we go about that. I was at the August meeting, I think it was August 20th, and as you heard, there's not a lot of enthusiasm about continuing with the property tax. The reason for that is it's not a trivial tax. Our building alone, just building 2, is $60,000 of additional tax every year. Building 1, another $60,000. Building 3, a third $60,000. That's what we're paying currently with the 1.5% rate. It's 1.5% of our property assessed valuation. So when we talk about continuing an SSA, people, this is expensive. And even if the rate for a new SSA were half that, 0.75, that's $30,000 a year just for our building that we are paying over and above what regular Downers Grove property owners are paying that are not part of the SSA. If we drop it to 0.5%, that's $20,000. Drop it to 0.25%, that's $10,000. $10,000 for our building, $10,000 for building 3, $10,000 for building 1. And then all those other multifamily residences in the SSA currently are right around that same amount. So after the August meeting, I went back and I talked with some of our residents because I wanted to get more. You are hearing a lot of opinions where they don't want any SSA period. That is not everyone, but I have to tell you that is the majority, is from what I've heard. And the reason is it's the money. It's absolutely the money. And so for those who are willing to pay additional money for the downtown, we understand that the DMC has got events. That does definitely help the residents in somewhat, but it's mostly businesses. There's parking issues. That helps the residents somewhat, but it's mostly commuters or businesses. Landscaping and snow removal, all of the things that SSA money is going to pay for, those do help residents, but by far and away, they're not the beneficiaries of the most of the value. So the takeaway I'd like you to have tonight is when you're considering what to do going forward, and I understand, we all understand the revenue is needed. Just please look at a cost-benefit equation. So if you're going to have 0.75%, which for us, is $30,000 of additional tax that we would pay over and above what a normal property would pay, we would look at wanting $30,000 of value coming back just for our building. An additional $30,000 for Acadia 1, another $30,000 for Acadia 3. That's going to be difficult to come up with. So please, when you're considering how to handle this revenue, and we all know that revenue is an issue, please try to look at a cost benefit that is a fair value. We are willing to pay our fair share, but the optimal word is fair in that. We are not interested in footing the bill for lots of Downers Grove residents that are getting benefits, but we're paying the cost. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yes, I haven't prepared remarks on this subject, but I wanted to piggyback on some of the points that Sue mentioned. I provided Dave so that he would distribute to you a document that I prepared that dealt with the subject of environmental sustainability. As you know from comments I've made in the committee room, I've been disappointed as well with the village's effort to deal with the subject of environmental sustainability. And rather than go through all of that material that I presented to Dave, which he may or may not at this point have copied to you, let me just get to one of what I think is key points that needs to be addressed unavoidably, and that is the relationship between what people understand as environmental sustainability and the subject of economic growth. from what I've observed in looking at other towns, typically, including Downers Grove, those two things are treated as though they're independent. And if you actually want to deal with the subject of environmental sustainability, it's unavoidable that you discuss what you understand to be the relationship between economic growth and environmental sustainability. And I'll leave it at that for tonight, other than to ask when these kinds of issues may be brought before the council and the residents of Downers Grove to discuss more fully.
Thanks. Any other comments from the audience? Okay, additional comments from council? Greg?
Thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to thank staff and everyone on the council for all the work over the last few months. I think we've put together a very good document. I think the key changes make it a stronger document, and I think it's providing a lot of value. I think the check-in at Q1, Q2 next year is going to be absolutely vital. It's at that point we may have some tough decisions to make. But I know that it's something that this council and the staff are up to. And I look forward to all the progress during that time. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Greg. Rich?
Yeah, I'd also like to thank staff. We do have a lean staff, so you have a small number of people doing a large number of things and doing it very well and very professionally. So, and you know, it's important for the residents to understand there's only so much we can put on our plate, and you know, this is why we have these discussions and the open meetings in the committee rooms. Related to volcano mulching, I think we should just fix that like tomorrow as far as instructing, you know, parkway trees and how they be planted. I don't think that's a long-range plan item as much as, and I believe I sent a pretty extensive document several months ago that goes into that in real detail, so.
Okay. Anyone else? All right, just so we're all clear, I want to make sure that I heard everybody or didn't hear everybody, as the case may be, but November 5th, our next intended meeting, we are going to accept what you see up there, that yellow period, as Greg said, being sort of a key point at which we'll be doing a check-in and reevaluating, but the intention would be between November 5th and whenever we hit that period, that the work of staff would be focused, as you see on that screen. So we're all, I mean, I know everybody's got other things they wish we were doing, but that's kind of collectively where we're going to land, right?
Agreed.
Okay, all right.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. It will be, as the Mayor said, on the November 5th council meeting agenda for final acceptance. And with that, that ends our first reading tonight.
Thank you, Dave.
And goes right back to me, I see. I have nothing further to add, Mayor. Thank you.
Well played. Enza.
Thank you, Mayor. 2 items tonight. The first is an ordinance amending disabled parking provisions, and the second is an ordinance amending the number of Class R2 liquor licenses. Both will be on the November 5th active.
Thank you. Mayor and council member reports. This is a period where everybody on the council has an opportunity to just talk about whatever's on their mind, oftentimes bringing up and highlighting events or activities in our community. So with that, we'll, who's going to look at me and get the key to start? Kavanaugh fell for it.
No reports.
Marge?
No report, Mayor.
Rich?
Just one report, since we won't have a meeting next week. I'd like to remind the public that the Downers Grove Historical Society is sponsoring once again the Living Cemetery, which will be from 12 a.m. to 12 p.m. For those of you who might be new to Downers Grove or haven't attended, it's where they have various actors portraying the people who are buried in that cemetery, and they're all in costume and in role. Don't tell them they're dead, because that comes as quite a shock to them. So, yeah, it'd be nice if you could join us for that event.
Leslie?
Just a reminder that there's coffee with the council on Saturday at 9 a.m., which I sadly cannot make, so please email me if you want to say anything to me. But that's 9 a.m., and it'll be the last one at the farmer's market.
Thank you. Greg?
Thank you, Mayor. The EDC, excuse me, monthly executive board meeting took place last Friday. Of course, we already heard an update last week from Michael Casa, our fantastic president and CEO of the organization, and all the different great projects that are going on and about to go on in Downers. that he did want me to give one additional update. The International Council of Shopping Center Deal-Making Show is coming up actually tomorrow and Thursday, the 16th and 17th. It's the largest retail development show in the Midwest. He has a booth there and already has appointments scheduled with several commercial brokers and developers, retail and restaurant, corporate, and real estate managers. So hopefully there will be additional deals brewing in Downers Grove very soon. Other than that, I just wanted to wish everybody out there a happy and safe Halloween.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.
Marge?
My bad, I did have a report. Pierce Honor Heritage Alliance is going to be hosting a night about bats. So if you'd like to learn about bats, October 21st, next Monday, they will be giving a free talk at Another Round Bar and Grill at 7 p.m. And you can get free tickets online. They just ask you to register in advance. And you're free to purchase a beverage or some food to eat while you listen to the presentation about bats. So, thank you.
Thank you. I have no reports, so with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
Mayor, I move to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.